I love the How to Train Your Dragon franchise, every bit of it, and DreamWorks, I've said it before, has done an amazing job not messing it up between all the different forms of media, TV shows, movies, and shorts, and even the 2 comics. I was weary about this new short when I first heard about it, but I talked myself into getting excited. However, now, I've learned something that honestly might do the exact thing that I have been fearing from the beginning, which is ruining the beauty and power of the ending of the final film. Hey y'all, I'm the Geek Apprentice, and I'm going to try my hardest to not let this be a doom and gloom video. This is partially a news video about How to Train Your Dragon Homecoming, but it is also me getting my thoughts and ideas out there, hoping that someone is seeing what I'm seeing and understands what I'm talking about and maybe can come up with a possible explanation or solution. Ever since we got that image released, which was a picture of a toy playset that said How to Train Your Dragon Homecoming and had Zephyr, Nuffink, and the Nightlights on it, I've been saying, oh, it's confirmed to be post-Epilogue. Now, why was I so sure that it was post-Epilogue and not before it? The short said it takes place 10 years after the dragons have left, but I was under the impression that the Epilogue took place 9 years after the dragons left. The reason being is because Gobber says Hiccup is 20 in the second film. Valka says in the third film, it's been a year, making them 21. And then many of the creators, including Dean DeBlois himself, said Hiccup and Astrid are 30 in the Epilogue. 9 years. That's less than 10. So therefore, before this new short. That's the first thing. The second thing is that when Toothless approaches the boat that Hiccup and his family are on in the Epilogue, his pupils are not soft and dilated, but far more feral. His entire posture is rigid and on guard, suggesting that he hasn't seen them and therefore doesn't recognize them because it's been quite some time. You know, like 9 or 10 years. The third thing is what Hiccup says to Toothless upon this encounter, which is, "Hey bud, remember me?" Why would he ask if Toothless remembers him if he's just visited him during Snoggletog? And finally, Zephyr and Nuffink are super hesitant to approach Toothless. Astrid and Hiccup have to continue reassuring them that he is a friend and will not harm them. This leads us to believe that this is the first time they've ever seen a dragon, let alone Toothless. Makes sense. But if this short takes place only a few months prior to the Epilogue scene, why on earth is their fear that intense? How could the Epilogue scene remain so profound, beautiful, intense, and emotional if they just saw each other a few months ago? Simple answer? It couldn't. Either the short isn't canon, or the Epilogue means nothing. And this is the exact tarnishing that I have been fearing since the beginning, which you can click the card or check the description below to see my videos where I go into more detail about that. As you can probably guess, the piece of news comes from DreamWorks themselves confirming that this short is pre-Epilogue. I came upon this news after a user, literally named something something, commented on one of my videos asking if I was sure that it was after the Epilogue. I responded and gave my reasoning, which I just mentioned, all of the logical reasons why it has to be after the Epilogue. They responded saying they agreed, that makes perfect sense, but they're not sure that's what it is still. And in that last comment, they shared a link to the DreamWorks official site, which says the following. How to Train Your Dragon Homecoming will feature the return of Jay Baruchel as the voice of Hiccup, America Ferrera as Astrid, Gerard Butler as Stoic, Craig Ferguson as Gobber, and Christopher Mintz-Plasse as Fishlegs. Taking place just before the emotional epilogue from the last installment of the film trilogy, and 10 years after the end of How to Train Your Dragon The Hidden World, How to Train Your Dragon Homecoming opens with Hiccup and Toothless sharing stories of their special relationship with their respective families as they prepare for the Snoggletog Festival. I must have read that blurb at least 15 times in a row, out loud, in silence, picking apart every single word to see if I missed something, because this just can't take place before the Epilogue. It doesn't make sense. Well, why not, you may be asking? Well, first of all, there are all those reasons that I just mentioned, which are not a matter of preference. They're logical reasonings. To add to that piece of logic, Why would Toothless remember Hiccup for all of those 10 years and then suddenly, after reuniting in the short, a few months later, in the epilogue, be so feral and rigid with him? How does he forget him so quickly and suddenly? The creators and animators clearly made Toothless to be feral and have forgotten Hiccup when we see him in the epilogue. This is something that has been confirmed over and over again. It's just not logical for Toothless to have visited the Isle of New Berk and then a few months later be super sketchy when he sees him. If you remember, during the epilogue, it wasn't until Toothless sniffed Hiccup's hand, recognized the scent, and recognized the pose that his pupils dilated and he got super happy to reunite with his best friend. That whole thing wouldn't be necessary if they had just seen each other within the last year. The other large reason has to do with the depth of emotion in that epilogue. If that moment in the epilogue is not the first time they've seen each other in 10 years, then it loses all of its beauty and power. It pretty much means nothing, so why would the creators do that? Some have suggested that it's because Dean DeBlois does not have a hand in this short, but I beg to differ. Dean DeBlois was only involved in 4 things: the 3 movies and the short Gift of the Night Fury. Everything else was other creators at DreamWorks, some of which did work on the films as well. From what I have found, the main people working on this specific short, Homecoming, some of them have worked on the series before and some of them are new. So all in all, with that in mind, it still doesn't make sense that this would happen. It can't be because Dean is not a part of it. At first I thought maybe they overlooked all of this logic. I mean, you can't get around ruining the emotion of the epilogue, but maybe they did genuinely overlook some of the logic. Nope. It clearly says on the site that they identify the epilogue as an emotional scene. Can't be that emotional if they just saw each other a few months ago and if it's not the first time the kids are seeing dragons. My second thought or possible solution came from picking apart that sentence that says that the opening scene of this short will have Hiccup and Toothless telling their respective families about their adventures. Maybe they're only referring to parts of that opening scene taking place before the epilogue, specifically just Hiccup. Maybe these 2 storytelling scenes don't occur at the exact same time. Perhaps when they said leading up to Snuggle Talk, that's only referring to Hiccup. His is before the epilogue and before the short, but with Toothless, it's after the epilogue and before the short, in between them, if I had it my way. So essentially, they show the scenes at the same time, but they're not taking place at the same time. Well, this isn't likely, it's just too confusing, but I tried. Now here's another solution idea I came up with that's kind of out there, so buckle up. Maybe, just maybe, all of the footage we've seen at the time of recording this video, all of the still shots, are in the imagination of the Nightlights. They're not actually on Berk, they're listening to Toothless's stories and imagining being on Berk. Yeah, I know, I told you it was out there. Another possible solution is that the Berkians never see the dragons while they're on Berk. I'm serious. I'm sure there will be a still that will drop very, very soon, probably right before I even upload this video, that shows the Berkians and the Nightlights together during the short. And no, the DVD art cover doesn't count. But I still want to go with this, so hear me out. First, maybe Toothless and his family visit the Isle of New Berk, but they don't interact with them. It's just to kind of show the Nightlights people. Yeah, that's not likely. Or perhaps the Nightlights, after hearing about the stories from Toothless, decide to somehow fly to New Berk themselves. This would cause the Light Fury and Toothless to have to go after them to bring them back to the Hidden World, because remember, the babies don't listen to the Alpha. They don't answer to anyone. So Toothless, even though they're his own children, probably wouldn't have control over them. I mentioned in my last video about all of the new images that these little dragons look like they might be kind of mischievous, so this is possible. They could be wreaking havoc with the pageant and no one has any idea that it's these baby dragons because they think the dragons are all in the Hidden World. I mean, imagine Hiccup in the midst of planning this constantly goes to Astrid saying, "I keep seeing little dragons, they look like a mix of the Light Fury," and Toothless and Astrid being like, "No, Hiccup, you're imagining things. I know, you miss him, we all do." This still doesn't fix the problem of Toothless remembering for all those years and then suddenly forgetting after a few months. But I like the idea and I actually think it would be really funny and cute despite this one logical flaw. Because it would essentially fix all but that one logical issue and definitely fix the emotional value issue. Which even then you might could say that what spurs Toothless to talk about these stories is he sees something in the hidden world, or something comes down the waterfall that reminds him of Hiccup suddenly, but then he forgets every few months. I don't know, that's stretching it. I'm trying, I'm really trying. However, ultimately, this is not a possibility, given that most of the descriptions say that in the end, the Birkins are reminded that humans and dragons are forever bonded. Yes, maybe the pageant alone does this, but I doubt that's the direction they're going. Although this does make me wonder if that shot of Astrid and Hiccup I showed in the last video could play into this idea if that's what's going to happen. Perhaps the Birkins never see the nightlights and they managed to get away, and in this shot you see Hiccup, mouth agape going, oh my gosh, there he is, but he's going back to the hidden world, and then Astrid being like, oh, that's so sweet. And maybe this is what spurs him to, a few months later, go and visit him in the hidden world and bring his family with him. That could work. Again, doubtful, but it's a nice thought. Now, I suppose one could argue that having the epilogue take place after the short does leave some amount of power in the ending being the epilogue. If the epilogue truly is the last thing, then that means that scene is the finishing and the finale of the franchise, which sounds really epic and cool, I'm not gonna lie, and it's what I wanted all along. My problem with this is what I've already stated. Logically speaking, most of what happens at the top of the epilogue doesn't make any sense if they've just seen each other, thus taking away the power of Hiccup and Toothless's reunion and the power of the kids' first encounter with dragons. So is that it? Do I not have any hope at all now? There is one thing, despite being out of ideas, that I am clinging to. Something that I've already sort of mentioned. On the site, the description describes the epilogue as emotional. They did not say that it takes place just before the epilogue. No, they said it takes place just before the emotional epilogue. In a small way, this lights a tiny flame of hope for me. But why? It tells me they are not oblivious to the incredible power of the epilogue scene, but in fact are keenly aware of it and are letting it influence their decisions concerning this short, and thus I need to sit back and trust them. And that is what I am holding on to. Wait! What if it's just a typo? Think about it, the only time in that description they mention a timeline placement is that one line where they say, just before the emotional epilogue. Maybe the people in charge of the DreamWorks site misread and put before epilogue instead of after epilogue. I mean, that's totally within the realm of possibility here. Especially when you consider everything I've said about logic, which is not too hard to see, that I would imagine would not be glossed over by the people working on this short. So that leaves me with two really good possibilities. Two flames of hope. One, maybe it is just a typo. Or two, I just need to wait and see and calm down about it, and that they are aware because they said emotional epilogue and don't want to ruin it. I can live with that. Anyway, I'm out of ideas. I'm trying to keep my head up in the hopes that DreamWorks has made this short work. That somehow, some way, come December, I'm gonna watch this short and go, oh, that's how they made it work. Because up until now, they've only made two mistakes. One was how they portrayed Astrid in Gift of the Night Fury. It was just weird. The other is a little story continuity thing that occurred in one episode of the first TV series that kind of contradicts what we know about Valka's story in the second film. Which, speaking of, I ought to make a video on that very topic and see if I can wiggle out some sort of justification for that. Something to consider. All in all, I do hope that everyone else is genuinely excited. This is just the kind of stuff I can't overlook. This series just means too much to me. I nearly began crying when I found out about this. Yes, I know that sounds silly, but it's true. As it stands, I'm back to the beginning where I'm hoping like crazy that I will be proven wrong. That making the short pre-epilogue will be done in a way that the epilogue is still the first time Hiccup and Toothless reunite, that it's still the first time the kids encounter dragons for the first time, that it's still insanely powerful. We'll see. I'm holding on to those two little flames I mentioned. One or the other has to come through. I'm hoping. If this is your first time here, Sorry, this was kind of a Debbie Downer video. I tried to be positive. I came up with a lot of ideas, as weird as some of them were. I'm normally a pretty darn upbeat, smiley, positive person, and I can prove it too. Just subscribe and look at these videos on other geeky topics. They'll show it to you. I'm a pretty happy person, I like to think. So yeah, that's all for today. Thank you for watching.